Wide receiver is a nice blend of long-term value between quarterback, running back. Running back we know is primarily dictated based off opportunity. Those guys typically are no longer starters or they're ineffective starters by the time they're 28, 29, 30. Wide receiver, you have a little bit of an extended runway. We know wide receiver is more so dictated based off talent rather than just raw volume and raw opportunity. But it's not necessarily like the quarterback position where these guys can make it till they're 38, 39, 40 years old. I mean, very rarely are you going to see Jerry Rice come around. So I want to go through, I want to look at every wide receiver in Dynasty right now, look at their updated price in comparison to rookie draft picks, talk about if they fall in the contending bucket, the rebuilding bucket, or the cornerstone bucket. And obviously the guys inside the top 5 rankings with Jefferson, Lamb, Chase, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Puka Nacua. All these players are cornerstone assets. They're all young enough where Jefferson's 24, Lamb's 24, Chase 23, St. Brown 24, Puka 22. We're not really worried about their long-term value, and at the same time, they are going to be productive enough where they're going to help you on a contending team right this second. So we really don't need to talk about those guys. Going over to A.J. Brown, this will be the first example where it's a little bit of a gray area where we can say, okay, A.J. Brown, 26 years old, just drafted in 2019. This is going to be a wide receiver that we shouldn't necessarily expect to be significantly worse when he's 27. We shouldn't expect this to be the last year and then we get some kind of fall off. I mean, in his production, it's probably going to be pretty consistent over the next few seasons. However, if you're going to be a rebuilding roster, we're not necessarily just looking for consistent production. What we're looking for in a rebuilding team is we are looking for a player that has the upside to continue to increase in value. If a player is almost guaranteed to either be capped at their current value or go down in value in Dynasty 12 months from now, then that is a player that more times than not, you should just look to go ahead and sell. So if I'm looking at A.J. Brown specifically on a rebuilding roster, when he's 27 years old next year, what has to happen for A.J. Brown to be worth more than the wide receiver 6? Because that's currently where he is in the flockfantasy.com community rankings. If A.J. Brown comes out and it is a great option this next season where he's the wide receiver 5 in fantasy, is he worth more than the wide receiver 6 in Dynasty next offseason? I would make the argument that he's probably not. I would make the argument that if this isn't the cap that you're going to see with this value, it's pretty close where if he's not the wide receiver 5 this next year from a points per game perspective, and say instead he's the wide receiver 13, he's going to go down in value. So for that reason, I'm going to go ahead. I would probably say A.J. Brown, even though he's younger and he's only 26 and I'm not expecting the production to go anywhere anytime soon, I'm still going to go through and say that he is someone that we are looking to sell on a rebuilding team in particular. Going over to Garrett Wilson, cornerstone asset. He's 23 years old, not worried about it. Tyreek Hill, I don't have to convince anybody here that he's a sell on a rebuilding team. He's very clearly a sell, where even if Tyreek Hill is the wide receiver 3 from a points per game perspective this season, next offseason, he's going to be worth less just given his age. I mean, go and look at guys like Devontae Adams. Go look at Stephon Diggs. I understand, yes, Diggs disappointed in the second half of the year. Go look at Kupp. That goes to show the downside of these players if they have a down year close to their age 30 season. But I mean, we've seen it time and time again, even the guys that have great seasons, if they're pushing this age, I mean, they're not necessarily going to be able to hold on to their value. Now, going over to what we have with Olave, cornerstone asset, 23 years old. You're going to have production right now, and you're going to have production in the long term. Not super concerned about it. Going over to what we have with Drake London, another example of someone who's incredibly young, another example of someone that you are going to get some long-term value from. He's 22 years old. He's like 2 years younger than Tank Dell, which is just nuts to think about. He's younger than Zay Flowers. So London, that cornerstone asset, should give you plenty of production this season and in the long term. DJ Moore, very similar story. So DJ Moore is only 26. He's been in the NFL since 2018, but he was so damn young coming out of Maryland. I actually got to see him put a beat down on our Texas Longhorns back in the day when I was at UT. But nonetheless, this is a wide receiver that is 26, is currently valued as the wide receiver 11. In terms of the upside for him to go up, I'm not necessarily worried if DJ Moore comes out and he's the wide receiver 11 in fantasy this next year. Is he going to be worth significantly less in Dynasty? Probably not. But does he have any room to go up? So no, he doesn't. So I would rather go through and not sell him. And if I could pivot off and maybe look at a wide receiver, we'll talk about a little bit later on, a wide receiver that's more so valued as the wide receiver 24, I'll let you know that is in a second, and get that player plus a future first on a rebuilding team. I think that make a lot of sense. I mean, also adding on the fact that obviously these guys like DJ Moore, I mean, we'll throw in the next few options because they're very, very similar. I want to throw all these guys into the same bucket. All these 24, 25, 26-year-old players. DJ Moore, T. Higgins, Brandon Ayuk, Michael Pittman, Jalen Waddle, Devonta Smith, Nico Collins, Tank Dell. If you're 24, 25, 26, the 24, 25-year-olds such as Nico Collins, Tank Dell, Devonta Smith, Jalen Waddle, I think you have a little more wiggle room there where with those kind of players, if you're a big-time believer in them and you go, Mason, I'm a rebuilding team, I have Waddle, I understand that he could go down in value next offseason, but I am very confident that this is going to be a wide receiver that goes out there and he's a top 10 option. Then by all means, just go ahead, hold on to it, because these players that are valued as like mid wide receiver 2s that are 24, 25, it's still in the range of outcomes and it's still a possibility that their value increases 12 months from now. But obviously a lot of that comes down to what you have with your own perception of those players. Because if you could pivot off, if you could say maybe move going back to DJ Moore and get back Jackson Smith and Jigba plus a future first, you have the upside in that if JSN turns it around, if he breaks out this next season, all of a sudden you have a ton of value that is just accrued on your roster in that. Obviously it's risky, just like holding on to DJ Moore on a rebuilding team would be a little bit risky as well. But you have the guaranteed asset in the 2025 first that's going to continue to rise in value. So let me pull up the trade calculator on flockfantasy.com real quick and let me look at what we currently have with that idea. DJ Moore versus Jackson Smith and Jigba in a future first. I'm going to assume the trade calculator would have the JSN side. So if we're going to do an early to mid 2025 first, they're saying it's not even close. They're saying that the JSN side's robbing them, which I would 100% agree with. I mean, it looks like a pretty damn good trade calculator in my mind. But let's go ahead and let's put a late 2025, mid to late 2025 first. Says it's a fair trade, still has the JSN and first round pick side winning. But 100% that's going to be something that I would look to do. I would love to take DJ Moore on a rebuilding team, pivot over to JSN in the future first. I mean, if we go through and look at a couple trades that were done in the trade calculator right now to get a sense of the gap in value that people are trading these players for, you can see that someone traded DJ Moore and Sam Darnold for JSN George Pickens. Someone traded DJ Moore for JSN Michael Mayer and a second rounder. Now, of course, with the trade calculator on the site, you can change the amount of starting lineup spots you have. You can change the amount of teams that are in your league. You can change a bunch of different things that are going to dictate how you are looking at these values. So if you wanted to go through and try to find some other trades, just do that. If you wanted to go ahead, if you wanted to try to look at your exact league settings, just hit the My League settings, put it in there, and the trade calculator should give you a much better idea of what you could realistically look to expect. And of course, if you're not already a member of flockfantasy.com, if you want to check out all these community rankings, they're free. That's what we're going off with this video on. Or if you want to check out our trade calculator, that's going to be behind a paywall, as well as all my rankings will be behind a paywall. But you can find all that on flockfantasy.com. Code FLOCK would get you 30% off any sub. Plus, code FLOCK will get yours truly to break down your Dynasty Fantasy Football team with the podcast, with a link in the description or comment section. But let's move over to the next guy that we're going to be looking at. And this is going to be the tier of, we'll start it off with DK Metcalf. So DK Metcalf, same draft class as AJ Brown. Obviously, they're both Ole Miss wide receivers, come out in 2019. Metcalf now for 3 straight seasons has been a high in wide receiver 3, low in wide receiver 2. If I'm looking at where he's still going in Dynasty mock drafts, I mean, I'm seeing DK Metcalf go before Jordan Addison, before Zay Flowers. I'm seeing that in these community rankings as well. To be completely honest with you, I don't care if I'm a rebuilding roster. I don't care if I'm a contending team. I'm going through, I'm selling DK Metcalf for these other wide receivers in a heartbeat, to be honest. I mean, Addison, Flowers, these players going to year 2, I mean, they're for sure going to be holds on a rebuilding roster. These are players that can definitely continue to rise in value from here on out. I would say George Pickens, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Jaden Reed as well, right? I mean, you're looking at Pickens. While he's going into year 3 of his career, still only 22 years old. I mean, he's actually younger than Zay Flowers, which is surprising. But nonetheless, pretty much all those year 2, year 3 options, those will be assets that we'd look to hold for the long term here. Mike Evans, I don't have to convince anybody to sell. The man was drafted back in 2014. If you're a rebuilding roster, you have absolutely no business holding on to Evans. Now, if you're looking at where he's valued in comparison to some of the rookie picks with the community rankings, he is currently alongside like a 2025 mid-elite first, the 111, the 112. So it is a little difficult if you want to say, well, Mason, I'm Mike Evans, I'm a rebuilding roster, and I can't get the 111. I can't get the 112. The best I could get for Mike Evans right now for my rebuilding team would be the 201. Should I go through? Should I sell him low? Or am I better off to hold until we get to the start of the season? And then if he's producing, sell him for a future first. That's always going to be something that you have to weigh in your own mind, and you have to understand your league mates and how you go through and make that decision. Just understand, if you are deciding to do that, you are deciding to roll the dice, especially with a player like Mike Evans. Because once you're into your 30s, if you're not producing, you are going to see that player fall off an absolute cliff when it comes to their dynasty value. So our next guy, Deebo Samuel, 27, I would classify Deebo very similar in that he's a contending asset. I don't really want Deebo Samuel on a rebuilding team. But the difference in holding on to Mike Evans going into this season versus the difference in holding on to Deebo Samuel, if you can't get exactly what you want from either one of these guys, is at least in the case of Deebo Samuel, you have a little bit of an extended runway in that if he is not productive at the beginning of the year and you're not able to trade him for a future first, obviously it's still a possibility that he just exponentially loses value. And I mean, all of a sudden he is just worth nothing. But if he's going to be 28 in 2025, then you could still go through and you could still say, okay, he has the upside where if everything goes right, this is a wide receiver that could bounce back, and maybe I could use him if I'm rebuilding in 2025, 2026, where you just wouldn't have that shot with Evans. So if you're a rebuilding team, obviously you're trying to sell Evans, but if you can't get exactly what you want, I'd probably sell him for 90 cents on the dollar. Or Deebo Samuel, if I'm a rebuilding team, going to look to sell, but if I can't get full price, if I can't get a late first round pick for Deebo and I'm only getting offered seconds, I'd rather hold, rather see him produce in the season, try to get a first then. And if it doesn't work out, then maybe I still have some kind of value in the future. Going over to our next guys, Stephon Diggs kind of fits that same boat as Mike Evans, right? Clearly you're looking to sell on a rebuilding team. Keenan Allen, clearly you're looking to sell on a rebuilding team. I mean, I have no idea how Keenan Allen's ahead of Davante Adams in the community rankings. Both contending assets. Give me the guy that is the wide receiver one in his offense. Give me Davante Adams. Calvin Ridley, I'd say, is a sell on a contending roster. I'm sorry, on a rebuilding roster. Hollywood Brown, another sell on a rebuilding roster. I actually recently saw Hollywood Brown go ahead of Adonai Mitchell in our last Dynasty mock draft. I mean, if you're looking at the, say, best case scenario for Hollywood, he comes out, he's a high-end wide receiver 2 in Kansas City. He's the wide receiver 14. It's the best year of his entire NFL career with the best quarterback play he's ever had. Then all of a sudden, he still doesn't have a deal in Kansas City in 2025. So your best case scenario, if you go through and hold on to Hollywood going into the season, that he does come out strong, that you're at one point able to go through and maybe package together like a second and Hollywood to go get a first. But 26-year-old wide receiver, wins with athleticism. I would say that this is going to be a sell, especially if you look at the contract situation. We're only has a one-year deal with KC. So on a rebuilding team, I'm definitely looking to sell. Like I said, Ridley, Keenan, Adams, I mean, nobody's going to argue. They're all sells. Godwin, Deontay Johnson, similar spot to Deebo Samuel, where if I'm a rebuilding roster, I'm throwing these guys on the trade block. I'm seeing what we can get right now. But at the same time, they're not 30. You have a little bit of an extended runway where if you can't hold on to them and sell them during the season, maybe at an elevated rate, you could still see something from them in 2025. But a lot of it just comes down to what your personal projections are for these players. And if you think they'll have the strong start to the season and you're able to flip them in week 4. Amari, clear sell. Christian Watson, I definitely say that this is an asset that's lost so much value that if you're looking to sell at this point, you're selling for a 2025 second rounder. I mean, I'm fine with that if you were telling me that you're just completely out on him. You have no faith in Christian Watson anymore. But if I'm a rebuilding team, he's a 24-year-old wide receiver attached to a pretty damn good quarterback. I think that he does have the upside for the long-term value, so I'd probably rather just look to hold, to be honest. Cooper Kupp, clear sell, don't have to talk about it. Josh Downs, clear hold, don't have to talk about it. Terry McLaurin, I know that he is a wide receiver that was also drafted in like 2019, so maybe you say, okay, it's similar mold to DK Metcalf. I don't know if I'm looking at Terry McLaurin. Stay like 5 years at Ohio State, so this is a wide receiver that I'd say on a rebuilding team I want nothing to do with. Jerry Jeudy, actually a younger option, drafted in 2020, only a year after Terry McLaurin. Came out of Alabama at 20 years old. Gets the extended runway as well with this second contract. So, I mean, if I'm looking at any wide receivers in this range, like Terry McLaurin, like Jerry Jeudy, if I'm a rebuilding roster, I would love to take Jerry Jeudy in a second rounder and go move him for a first. But you do have a little bit of flexibility here where if you're a believer, you can hold on to him if you'd like. Romeo Doubs can definitely hold on to him if you want. John Dotson can definitely hold on to him if you want. Mike Williams, I'd say you kind of have to sell. Pushing 30 at this point. Obviously, he's going over to the Jets, which should be a decent situation for him, but still. Gabe Davis, I think it kind of comes down to your personal projections. And then as we get down here to the very bottom end, if you could sell any of these guys for a second round pick, I'm out on a rebuilding roster. Especially a 2025 second rounder, and that you're able to get the additional value next offseason while at the same time not having Jacoby Myers on your team where maybe he doesn't have a lot. Like, nothing's going to happen with Jacoby Myers where all of a sudden he's worth significantly more in Dynasty next offseason. Nothing's going to happen with Cortland Sutton. Nothing's going to happen with Curtis Samuel. For them to increase in Dynasty value 12 months from now. Like, we've seen Myers go out there and have stretches where he's a top 24 wide receiver, which I would say that's pretty much his ceiling. And even when that does happen, you're getting a second round pick. So I'd say anybody here that you're able to get a second rounder from, you don't have to have their production in right now. So you can get a higher rookie pick in your own draft next year. And at the same time, we can get an asset that's guaranteed to have value 12 months from now. Whereas a lot of these guys may just be worth literally nothing. I'm going to do it. The one guy that I want to point out on this page that I think is maybe an intriguing buy low candidate if you are a rebuilding team. Quentin Johnston, wide receiver 54, does seem probably a little too low. I am not a Quentin Johnston fan. I want to get that out there. I liked him coming out of school. I mean, he checked a lot of boxes, but obviously after his rookie season, you can safely say, yeah, there's probably someone that's bad, probably someone that is going to be a bust. But at the same time, at this price point, I would be willing to just take the shot on him, especially with the situation that you have going forward. But I think that's all I have for you. I hope you're able to get something from this. As always, hit that like, subscribe, play Dynasty. And yeah, really appreciate you. Really hope we get to see you out with a video tomorrow.